Hi there, welcome, happy Friday. I'm Mary, I am a librarian at the Claremont Branch Library, and I am excited to have you joining me again today for our daily reading of Dorothy and the Wizard in Oz by L. Frank Baum. We are halfway through the book. We'll be reading chapters 11 and 12 today. Yesterday, in our reading, our friends were going through the Valley of Voe to get to a mountain on the other side. Along the way, they were attacked by invisible bears, but were able to escape by walking on the river toward the mountain. When they got to the mountain, they started to climb up and found halfway up a man that had long hair that was braided. He told them a story of how he ended up in that mountain from the earth, and they thought he might be a little bit crazy, so they continued on their journey up the mountain to where they were told the Gargoyles would live. And that's where we're going to pick it up in chapter 11. So let's see what happens to our friends today. This is chapter 11. They meet the wooden gargoyles. Another breathless climb brought our adventurers to a third landing where there was a rift in the mountain. On peering out, all they could see was the rolling banks of the clouds, so thick that they obscured everything else. But the travelers were obliged to rest, and while they were sitting on the rocky floor, the wizard felt in his pocket and brought out the 9 tiny piglets. To his delight, they were now plainly visible, which proved that they had passed beyond the influence of the magical Valley of Voe. "Why, we can see each other again!" cried one joyfully. "Yes," sighed Eureka, "and I can also see you again, and the sight makes me dreadfully hungry. Please, Mr. Wizard, may I eat just one of the fat little pigs? You'd never miss one of them, I'm sure." "What a horrid, savage beast!" exclaimed the piglet. "And after we've been such good friends, too, and played with one another." "When I'm not hungry, I love to play with you all," said the kitten demurely. "But when my stomach is empty, it seems that nothing would fill it as nicely as a fat little pig." "And we trusted you so," said another of the 9 reproachfully. "And I thought you were respectable," said another. "It seems we were mistaken," declared a third, looking at the kitten timorously. "No one with such murderous desires should belong to our party, I am sure." "You see, Eureka," remarked Dorothy reprovingly, "you are making yourself disliked. There are certain things proper for a kitten to eat, but I never heard of a kitten eating a pig under any circumstances." "Did you ever see such little pigs before?" asked the kitten. "They are no bigger than mice, and I'm sure mice are proper for me to eat." "It isn't the bigness, dear, it's the variety," replied the girl. "These are Mr. Wizard's pets, just as you are my pet, and it wouldn't be any more proper for you to eat them than it would be for Jim to eat you." "And that's just what I'll do if you don't let those little balls of pork alone," said Jim, glaring at the kitten with his big round eyes. "If you injure any one of them, I'll chew you up instantly." The kitten looked at the horse thoughtfully, as if trying to decide whether he meant it or not. "In that case," she said, "I'll leave them alone. You haven't many teeth left, Jim, but the few you have are sharp enough to make me shudder. So the piglets will be perfectly safe hereafter, as far as I'm concerned." "That is right, Eureka," remarked the wizard earnestly. "Let us all be a happy family and love one another." Eureka yawned and stretched herself. "I've always loved the piglets," she said, "but they don't love me." "No one can love a person he's afraid of," asserted Dorothy. "If you behave and don't scare the little pigs, I'm sure they'll grow fond of you." The wizard now put the 9 tiny ones back into his pocket, and the journey was resumed. "We must be pretty near the top now," said the boy, as they climbed wearily up the dark, winding stairway. "The country of the Gurgles can't be far from the top of the earth," remarked Dorothy. "It isn't very nice down here. I'd like to get home again, I'm sure." No one replied to this, because they found they needed all of their breath for the climb. The stairs had become narrower, and Zeb and the wizard often had to help Jim pull the buggy from one step to another, or keep it from jamming against the rocky walls. At last, however, a dim light appeared ahead of them, which grew clearer and stronger as they advanced. "Thank goodness we're nearly there," panted the little wizard. Jim, who was in advance, saw the last stair before him and stuck his head above the rocky sides of the stairway. Then he halted, ducked down, and began to back up, so that he nearly fell with the buggy into the others. "Let's go down again," he said in a hoarse whisper. "Nonsense," snapped the tired wizard. "What's the matter with you, old man?" "Everything," grumbled the horse. "I've taken a look at this place, and it's no fit country for real creatures to go. Everything's dead up there. No flesh or blood or growing thing anywhere." "Never mind, we can't turn back," said Dorothy, "and we don't intend to stay there anyhow." "It's dangerous," growled Jim in a stubborn tone. "See here, my good steed," broke in the wizard. "Little Dorothy and I may have been in queer countries in many of our travels, and we've always escaped without harm. We've been to the marvelous land of Oz, haven't we, Dorothy? So we don't much care what the country of the Gargoyles is like. Go ahead, Jim, and whatever happens, we'll make the best of it." "All right," answered the horse. "This is your excursion and not mine, so if you get into trouble, don't blame me." With this speech, he bent forward and dragged the buggy up the remaining steps. The others followed, and soon they were all standing upon the broad platform and gazing at the most curious and startling sight their eyes had ever beheld. "The country of the Gargoyles is all wooden!" exclaimed Zeb, and so it was. The ground was sawdust, and the pebbles scattered around were hard knots from trees, worn smooth in the course of time. There were odd wooden houses, with carved wooden flowers in the front yards. The tree trunks were of coarse wood, and the leaves of the trees were shavings. The patches of grass were splinters of wood, and where neither grass nor sawdust showed was a solid wooden flooring. Wooden birds fluttered among the trees, and wooden cows were browsing upon the wooden grass. And the most amazing thing of all were the wooden people, the creatures known as gargoyles. These were very numerous, for the place was thickly inhabited, and a large group of the queer people clustered near, gazing sharply upon the strangers who had emerged from the long spiral stairway. The gargoyles were very small of stature, being less than 3 feet high. Their bodies were round, their legs short and thick, and their arms extraordinarily long and stout. Their heads were too big for their bodies, and their faces were decidedly ugly to look upon. Some had long curved noses and chins, small eyes and wide grinning mouths. Others had flat noses, protruding eyes, and ears that were shaped like those of an elephant. There were many types, indeed, scarcely 2 being alike, but all were equally disagreeable in appearance. The tops of their heads had no hair, but were carved into a variety of fantastic shapes, some having a row of points or balls around the top, other designs resembling flowers or vegetables, and still others having squares that looked like waffles cut crisscross on their heads. They all wore short wooden wings which were fastened to their wooden bodies by means of wooden hinges with wooden screws. And with these wings they flew swiftly and noiselessly here and there, their legs being of little use to them. This noiseless motion was one of the most peculiar things about the gargoyles. They made no sound at all, either in flying or trying to speak, and they conversed mainly by means of quick signals that they made with their wooden fingers or lips. Neither was there any sound to be heard anywhere throughout the wooden country. The birds did not sing, nor the cows moo, yet there was more than ordinary activity everywhere. These group of these queer creatures, which was discovered clustered near the stairs, at first remained staring and motionless, glaring with evil eyes at the intruders who had so suddenly appeared in their land. In turn, the wizard and the children, the horse and the kitten, examined the gargoyles with the same silent attention. "There's going to be trouble, I'm sure," remarked the horse. "Unhitch those tugs, Zeb, and set me free from the buggy, so I can fight comfortably." "Jim's right," said the wizard. "There's going to be trouble, and my sword isn't stout enough to cut up those wooden bodies, so I shall have to get out my revolvers." He got out a satchel from the buggy, and opening it, took out two deadly-looking revolvers that made the children shrink back in alarm, just to look at. "What harm can the Gurgles do?" asked Dorothy. "They have no weapons to hurt us with." "Each of their arms is a wooden club," answered the little man, "and I'm sure the creatures mean mischief, by the looks in their eyes. Even these revolvers can merely succeed in damaging a few of their wooden bodies, and after that we will be at their mercy." "But why fight at all in that case?" asked the girl. "So I may die with a clear conscience," returned the wizard gravely. "It's every man's duty to do the best he knows how, and I'm going to do it." "Wish I had an axe," said Zeb, who by now had unhitched the horse. "If we had known we were coming, we might have brought along several other useful things," responded the wizard. "But we dropped into this adventure rather unexpectedly." The gargoyles had backed away a distance when they heard the sound of talking, for although our friends had spoken in low tones, their words seemed loud in the silence surrounding them. But as soon as the conversation ceased, the grinning, ugly creatures arose in a flock and flew swiftly toward the strangers, their long arms stretched out before them like the bowsprings of a fleet of sailboats. The horse had especially attracted their notice, because it was the biggest and the strangest creature they had ever seen, and so it became the center of their first attack. But Jim was ready for them, and when he saw them coming, he turned his heels toward them and began kicking out as hard as he could. Crash! Crack! Bang! went his iron-shod hoofs against the wooden bodies of the gargoyles, and they were battered right and left with such force that they scattered like straws in the wind. But the noise and clatter seemed as dreadful to them as Jim's heels, for all who were able swiftly turned and flew away to a great distance. The others picked themselves up from the ground, one by one, and quickly rejoined their fellows, so for a moment the horse thought he had won the fight with ease. But the wizard was not so confident. "Those wooden things are impossible to hurt," he said, "and all the damage Jim has done to them is to just knock a few splinters from their noses and ears. That cannot make them look any uglier, I'm sure, and it's my opinion they will soon renew the attack." "What made them fly away?" asked Dorothy. "The noise, of course. Don't you remember how the champion escaped them by shouting his battle cry?" "Suppose we escape down the stairs too," suggested the boy. "We have time just now, and I'd rather face the invisible bears than those wooden imps." "No," returned Dorothy stoutly. "It won't do to go back, for then we would never get home. Let's fight it out." "That is what I advise," said the wizard. "They haven't defeated us yet, and Jim is worth a whole army." But the gargoyles were clever enough not to attack the horse the next time. They advanced in a great swarm, having been joined by many more of their kind, and they flew straight over Jim's head to where the others were standing. The wizard raised one of his revolvers and fired it into the throng of his enemies, and the shot resounded like the clap of thunder in the silent place. Some of the wooden beings fell flat upon the ground, where they quivered and trembled in every limb, but most of them managed to wheel and escape again to a good distance. Zeb ran and picked up one of the gargoyles that lay nearest to him. The top of its head was carved into a crown, and the wizard's bullet had struck it exactly in the left eye, which was a hard wooden knot. Half of the bullet stuck in the wood, and half stuck out, so it had been the jar and the sudden noise that had knocked the creature down, more than the fact that it was really hurt. Before this crowned gargoyle had recovered himself, Zeb had wound a strap several times around its body, confining its wings and arms so that it could not move. Then, having tied the wooden creature securely, the boy buckled the strap and tossed his prisoner into the buggy. By that time, the others had all retired. Chapter 12. A Wonderful Escape. For a while, the enemy hesitated to renew the attack. Then a few of them advanced until another shot from the wizard's revolver made them retreat. "That's fine," said Zeb. "We've got 'em on the run now, sure enough." "But only for a time," replied the wizard, shaking his head gloomily. "These revolvers are good for 6 shots each, but when those are gone, we shall be helpless." The gargoyles seemed to realize this, for they sent a few of their band time after time to attack the strangers and draw the fire from the little man's revolvers. In this way none of them was shocked by the dreadful report more than once, for the main band kept far away, and each time a new company was sent into the battle. When the wizard had fired all 12 of his bullets, he had caused no damage to the enemy, except to stun a few by the noise, and so he was no nearer to victory than in the beginning of the fray. "What shall we do now?" asked Dorothy anxiously. "Let's yell, all together," said Zeb. "And fight at the same time," added the wizard. "We will get near Jim so that he can help us, and each one must take some weapon and do the best he can. I'll use my sword, although it isn't much account in this affair. Dorothy must take her parasol and open it suddenly when the wooden folks attack her. I haven't anything for you, Zeb." "I'll use the king," said the boy, and pulled his prisoner out of the buggy. The bound gargoyle's arms extended far out beyond its head, so by grasping its wrists, Zeb found the king made a very good club. The boy was strong for one of his years, having always worked upon a farm, so he was likely to prove more dangerous to the enemy than the wizard. When the next company of gargoyles advanced, our adventurers began yelling as if they had gone mad. Even the kitten gave a dreadfully shrill scream, and at the same time Jim the cab horse neighed loudly. This daunted the enemy for a time, but the defenders were soon out of breath. Perceiving this, as well as the fact that there were no more of the awful bangs to come from the revolvers, the gargoyles advanced in a swarm as thick as bees, so that the air was filled with them. Dorothy squatted upon the ground and put up her parasol, which nearly covered her and proved a great protection. The wizard's sword blade snapped into a dozen pieces at the first blow. He struck against the wood people. Zeb pounded away with the gargoyle he was using as a club until he had knocked down dozens of foes. But at last they clustered so thickly about him he was no longer had enough room in which to swing his arms. The horse performed some wonderful kicking, and even Eureka assisted when she leapt bodily upon the gargoyles and scratched and bit at them like a wild cat. But all this bravery amounted to nothing at all. The wooden things wound their long arms around Zeb and the wizard, and held them fast. Dorothy was captured in the same way, and numbers of the gargoyles clung to Jim's legs, so weighing him down that the poor beast was helpless. Eureka made a desperate dash to escape and scampered along the ground like a streak, but a grinning gargoyle flew after her and grabbed her before she had gone very far. All of them expected nothing less than instant death, but to their surprise, the wooden creatures flew into the air with them and bore them far away, over miles and miles of wooden country, until they came to a wooden city. The houses of this city had many corners, being square and 6-sided and 8-sided. They were tower-like in shape, and the best of them seemed old and weather-worn, yet all were strong and substantial. To one of these houses, which had neither doors nor windows, but only one broad opening far up underneath the roof, the prisoners were brought by their captors. The gargoyles roughly pushed them into the opening, where there was a platform, and then flew away and left them. As they had no wings, the strangers could not fly away, and if they jumped down from such a height, they would surely be killed. The creatures had sense enough to reason that way, and the only mistake they made was in supposing the Earth people were unable to overcome such ordinary difficulties. Jim was brought up with the others, although it took a good many gargoyles to carry the beast through the air and land him on the high platform, and the buggy was thrust in after him because it belonged to the party, and the wooden folks had no idea what it was used for, or whether it was alive or not. When Eureka's captor had thrown the kitten in after the others, the last gargoyle silently disappeared, leaving our friends to breathe freely once more. "What an awful fight," said Dorothy, catching her breath in little gasps. "Oh, I don't know," purred Eureka, smoothing her ruffled fur with her paw. "We didn't manage to hurt anybody, and nobody managed to hurt us." "Thank goodness we are together again, even if we are prisoners," sighed the little girl. "I wonder why they didn't kill us on the spot," remarked Zeb, who had lost his king in the struggle. "They are probably keeping us for some ceremony," the wizard answered reflectively. but there is no doubt that they intend to kill us, as dead as possible, in a short time." "As dead as possible would be pretty dead, wouldn't it?" asked Dorothy. "Yes, my dear, but we have no need to worry about that just now. Let us examine our prison and see what it's like." The space underneath the roof where they stood permitted them to see on all sides of the tall building, and they looked with much curiosity at the city spread out beneath them. Everything visible was made of wood, and the scene seemed stiff and extremely unnatural. From their platform a stair descended into the house, and the children and the wizard explored it after lighting a lantern to show them the way. Several stories of empty rooms rewarded their search, but nothing more. So after a time they came back to the platform again. Had there been any doors or windows in the lower rooms, or had not the boards of the house been so thick and stout, escape would have been easy. But to remain down below was like being in a cellar or the hold of a ship, and they did not like the darkness or the damp smell. In this country, as in all others, they had visited underneath the earth's surface. There was no night, a constant and strong light coming from some unknown source. Looking out, they could see into some of the houses near them, where there were open windows in abundance, and were able to mark the forms of the wooden gargoyles moving about in their dwellings. "This seems to be their time of rest," observed the wizard. "All people need rest, even if they are made of wood, and as there is no night here, they select a certain time of the day in which to sleep or doze." "I feel sleepy myself," remarked Zeb, yawning. "Why, where's Eureka?" cried Dorothy suddenly. They all looked around, but the kitten was no place to be seen. "She's gone out for a walk," said Jim gruffly. "Where? On the roof?" asked the girl. "No, she just dug her claws into the wood and climbed down the sides of the house to the ground." "She couldn't climb down, Jim," said Dorothy. "To climb means to go up." "Who said so?" demanded the horse. "My schoolteacher said so, and she knows a lot, Jim." "To climb down is sometimes used as a figure of speech," remarked the wizard. "Well, this was the figure of a cat," said Jim, "and she went down anyhow, whether she climbed or crept." "Dear me, how careless Eureka is!" exclaimed the girl, much distressed. "The Gurgles will surely get her." "Ha ha ha!" chuckled the cab horse. "They're not Gurgles, little maid. They are Gargoyles." "Never mind. They'll get Eureka, whatever they're called." "No, they won't," said the voice of the kitten, and Eureka herself crawled over the edge of the platform and sat quietly upon the floor. "Wherever have you been, Eureka?" asked Dorothy sternly. "Watching the wooden folks. They're too funny for anything, Dorothy. Just now they're all going to bed, and what do you think? They'll unhook their hinges of their wings and put them in a corner until they wake up again." "What? The hinges?" "No, the wings." "That," said Zeb, "explains why this house is used by them for a prison. If any of the gargoyles act badly and have to be put in jail, they are brought here and their wings unhooked and taken away from them until they promise to be good." The wizard had listened intently to Eureka. "I wish I had some of those loose wings," he said. "Could we fly with them?" asked Dorothy. "I think so. If the gargoyles can unhook the wings, then the power to fly lies in the wings themselves, and not in the wooden bodies of the people who wear them. So if we had the wings, we could probably fly as well as they do, at least while we were in their country, and under the spell of its magic." "But how would it help us to be able to fly?" questioned the girl. "Come here," said the little man, and took her to one of the corners of the building. "Do you see that big rock standing on the hillside yonder?" he continued, pointing with his finger. "Yes, it's a good way off, but I can see it," she replied. "Well, inside that rock, which reaches up into the clouds, is an archway, very much like the one we entered when we climbed the spiral stairway from the Valley of Voe. I'll get my spyglass, and then you can see it more clearly." He fetched a small but powerful telescope, which had been in his satchel, and by its aid the little girl clearly saw the opening. "Where does it lead to?" she asked. "That I cannot tell," said the wizard, "but we cannot now be far below the earth's surface, and that entrance may lead to another stairway that will bring us on top of our world again, where we belong. So if we had the wings and could escape the gargoyles, We might fly to that rock and be saved." "I'll get you the wings," said Zeb, who had thoughtfully listened to this. "That is, if the kitten will show me where they are." "But how can you get down?" inquired the girl, wonderingly. For answer, Zeb began to unfasten Jim's harness, strap by strap and buckle by buckle, buckled one piece to another, until he had made a long leather strap that would reach to the ground. "I can climb down that all right," he said. "No, you can't," remarked Jim with a twinkle in his round eyes. "You may go down, but you can only climb up." "Well, I'll climb up when I get back then," said the boy with a laugh. "Now, Eureka, you'll have to show me the way to those wings." "You must be very quiet," warned the kitten, "for if you make the least noise the gargoyles will wake up. They can hear a pin drop." "I'm not going to drop a pin," said Zeb. He had fastened one end of the strap to a wheel of the buggy, and now he let the line dangle over the side of the house. "Be careful," cautioned Dorothy earnestly. "I will," said the boy, and let himself slide over the edge. The girl and the wizard leaned over and watched Zeb work his way carefully downward, hand over hand, until he stood upon the ground below. Eureka clung with her claws to the wooden side of the house, and let herself down easily. Then together they crept away to enter the low doorway of a neighboring dwelling. The watchers waited in breathless suspense until the boy again appeared, his arms now full of wooden wings. When he came to where the strap was hanging, he tied the wings all in a bunch to the end of the line, and the wizard drew them up. Then the line was let down again for Zeb to climb up. Eureka quickly followed him, and soon they were all standing together upon the platform, with 8 of the much-prized wings beside them. The boy was no longer sleepy, but full of energy and excitement. He put the harness together again and hitched Jim to the buggy. Then, with the wizard's help, he tried to fasten some of the wings to the old cab horse. This was no easy task, because half of each one of the hinges of the wings was missing, but it's being still fastened to the body of the gargoyle who had used it. However, the wizard went once more to his satchel, which seemed to contain a surprising variety of odds and ends, and brought out a spool of strong wire, by means of which they managed to fasten 4 wings to Jim's harness, 2 near his head and 2 near his tail. They were a bit wiggly, but secure enough if only the harness held together. The other 4 wings were fastened to the buggy, 2 on each side, for the buggy must bear the weight of the children and the wizard as it flew through the air. These preparations had not consumed a great deal of time, but the sleeping gargoyles were beginning to wake up and move around, and some of them would be hunting for their missing wings. So the prisoners resolved to leave the prison at once. They mounted into the buggy, Dorothy holding Eureka safe in her lap. The girl sat in the middle of the seat with Zeb and the wizard on either side of her. When all was ready, the boy shook the reins and said, "Fly away, Jim!" "Which wings must I flop first?" asked the cab horse undecidedly. "Flop them all together," suggested the wizard. "Some of them are crooked," objected the horse. "Never mind. We will steer with the wings of the buggy," said Zeb. "Just you light out and make for that rock, Jim, and don't waste any time about it either." So the horse gave a groan, flopped its 4 wings all together, and flew away from the platform. Dorothy was a little anxious about the success of their trip, for the way Jim arched his long neck and spread out his bony legs as he fluttered and floundered through the air was enough to make anybody nervous. He groaned, too, as if frightened, and the wings creaked dreadfully because the wizard had forgotten to oil them. But they kept fairly good time with the wings of the buggy, so that they made excellent progress from the start. The only thing that anyone could complain of with justice was the fact that they wobbled first up and then down, as if the road were rocky instead of being as smooth as the air could make it. The main point, however, was that they flew, and flew swiftly, if but a bit unevenly, toward the rock for which they headed. Some of the gargoyles saw them presently, and lost no time in collecting a band to pursue the escaping prisoners, so that when Dorothy happened to look back, she saw them coming in a great cloud that almost darkened the sky. That is the end of our reading for this week. Come back next week on Monday to find out what happens if they're able to escape the gargoyles, if they make it to the rock, and will the rock lead them back to the surface of the earth. So come back Monday to find those things out. Until then, I hope you have a happy 4th of July weekend, and I will see you on Monday.